Alright, sit down, lock in, and put the phone on Do Not Disturb, because what Drake just did tonight is going to age like curdled milk in a summer parking lot. Drake, the man who spent the last 2 years trying to convince a courtroom, a country, and a Costco parking lot full of Stan accounts that he is unbothered. Well, Drake just walked outside, in front of God, cameras, and a chain full of diamonds that he assigned to women who do not want him, and Drake made the single most embarrassing move of the entire calendar year. Drake pointed at his own face, mid-song, mid-club, mid-flex, and Drake tried to mock ASAP Rocky's scar. Yeah, that happened. And before we even get 1 inch deeper, understand this, because I am telling you right now, this is not a beef anymore. This is not rap. This is not hip-hop. This is a full-blown, medically diagnosable, straight out of a Lifetime thriller obsession arc, and Drake is the lead actor. Leave a like, hit subscribe, and hype this one up in the comments, because the story I am about to walk you through, minute by minute, receipt by receipt, is the exact moment Drake stopped being the biggest artist of a generation and turned into the guy at the wedding who cannot stop staring at his ex from across the room. And I promise you, by the time we are done, you will understand why Drake cannot win this one, why he was never going to win this one, and why every second Drake spends breathing on ASAP Rocky's name is another gallon of gasoline on his own house. So here is the situation, straight, no chaser. Drake is at the Nocta event. Drake is surrounded by his little circle, his little chain, his little cameras. And Drake decides to play a song off his own album, Iceman, the record Burning Bridges. And right at the line, the exact line, look in the mirror, see where talking gets you, Drake lifts his finger, drags it across his own face, and points to the same spot where ASAP Rocky has a visible scar. That is not accidental. That is not vibe. That is not a man lost in the music. That is choreography. That is a man who rehearsed this in a mirror before he left the house. Drake picked the moment. Drake picked the line. Drake picked the finger. Drake picked the angle for the camera. And Drake picked the coward's window, because the window Drake picked was the exact moment ASAP Rocky was nowhere near him, nowhere near the room, nowhere near the country. Now let me remind you of something, because this is where the whole thing detonates. Not too long ago, ASAP Rocky, Rihanna, Jay-Z, and Future were all at the same World Cup event Drake was at. Same building, same air, same lights, same night. And Drake had his little goons with him. Drake had the shooters. Drake had the shirts. Drake had the chain. Drake had the whole entourage. And Drake did not, I repeat, Drake did not point at his face, mock a scar, hum a diss, whisper a bar, tap a shoulder, blow a kiss, roll an eye, or blink a syllable in ASAP Rocky's direction. Nothing. Not one thing. Not a peep. Drake was a monk. Drake was a librarian. Drake was a chapel candle. Silent. Composed. Ghost mode. And then, when everyone dispersed, when the planes had landed in 3 different continents, when there is literally an ocean between Drake and any man he claims he wants smoke with, that is when Drake finds his voice. That is when Drake turns into a lion. That is when Drake becomes a warrior. That is when Drake decides now, at 3 in the morning, alone in a room full of hired reactions, is the moment to point at a man's scar. And I want you to hear me on this, because this is the part nobody is saying loud enough. That is not tough. That is not bold. That is not gangster. That is the exact energy of a middle schooler who waits until the bus doors close before they finally shout something out the window. Drake, you're that kid. Drake, you have become that kid. Drake, that kid grew up, made $3 billion, and became the international poster child of typing loud and moving quiet. And it gets worse. Because while Drake is doing this little pantomime, while Drake is dragging his finger across his own face like a drama school reject, guess what Drake is wearing? Drake is wearing that chain. You know the chain. The chain Drake described, in his own words, as a diamond for every woman he almost married. Every diamond, every stone, every glimmer is a woman Drake tried to lock down and could not. And you know which one of those stones does not belong to a woman Drake almost married? Rihanna. The exact woman this entire scar mockery is about. The exact woman A$AP Rocky is currently building a family with. The exact woman who chose, and chose again, and none of those choices have Drake's name attached. That chain is not a flex. That chain is a receipt. That chain is a filing cabinet of rejection Drake decided to lock around his own neck for the world to see. Now watch what is happening here, because this is where the psychology gets ugly. Drake is not battling A$AP Rocky. Drake is not battling LeBron. Drake is not battling Kendrick. Drake is battling the fact that Rihanna, the biggest star on planet Earth, the woman entire civilizations would collapse for, the woman who is basically a modern Helen of Troy walking around in a Fendi hoodie, chose A$AP Rocky. And Drake cannot unchoose her feelings for him. Drake could drop the greatest album of the century tomorrow. Drake could win 9 Grammys next Sunday. Drake could buy the moon. And Rihanna is still going to be at home with A$AP Rocky, giving that man another child, laughing about a scar that a jealous ex on a different continent tried to weaponize for a 5-second video clip. That is not a beef. That is a documentary in the making. That is the pilot episode of a Netflix limited series. Drake, my man, that is the Whispering Willows arc. That is the Obsession film. That is the movie where the woman gets a restraining order and the guy still shows up outside her window with headphones on, humming a track. If Drake had a whispering willow tree right now, Rihanna's name would be carved into it 1,000 times, and every single leaf would be crying. This is not rap beef. This is cinema. And Drake is not the hero of the movie. Drake is not even the anti-hero. Drake is the villain the audience is embarrassed for. And I want to sit with the Iceman thing for a second, because the album title alone tells you the whole psychology. Drake called this record Iceman. Iceman. As in cold. As in unbothered. As in frozen over. As in cannot be moved. And then Drake spent the entire promotional cycle proving the opposite. Every interview, every stage moment, every club appearance, every social post, every t-shirt drop, every finger drag, is a heat map of a man who is anything but frozen. Drake, if you were actually ice, the songs would not need to be about A$AP Rocky, LeBron, or Kendrick. If you were actually ice, the chain would not need to catalog the women who rejected you. If you were actually ice, the whole tour would not double as a group therapy session for unresolved grudges. Iceman is not a title. Iceman is a wish. Iceman is a manifestation attempt. Iceman is Drake standing in front of a mirror whispering to himself, please, please, please let this be who I am, while the reflection whispers back, brother, we both know. And here is the part that should sting the most. If any of Drake's people, any of these little OVO defenders, any of these little Iceman apologists, still have a functioning brain cell left. A$AP Rocky did not respond. A$AP Rocky did not tweet. A$AP Rocky did not post a story. A$AP Rocky did not clap back. A$AP Rocky did not even blink. Because A$AP Rocky is at home. With Rihanna. With the kids. With the actual life Drake has been shopping for at every red carpet in North America for the last decade. A$AP Rocky's clapback is his living room. A$AP Rocky's clapback is his morning routine. A$AP Rocky's clapback is his family portrait. There is nothing Drake can say, do, sing, spin, or point at that competes with the fact that A$AP Rocky woke up this morning, kissed Rihanna, and did not once think about Drake. Meanwhile, Drake, on the same night, on the same chain, on the same stage, in the same building, decided he was not done being lame. Because if you have not heard, Drake also, that same evening at that same Nocta manor, put on display a set of t-shirts, custom made, sprayed across the front, that read, and I want you to say this out loud with me. So you can feel the full weight of just how corny this is. The only LeBron I rate is Juan. Juan. As in the Spanish padel player Juan Lebrón. Which means Drake sat down with a design team, brainstormed insults, workshopped angles, ran mock-ups, chose fonts, picked spacing, and finalized production. All for a shirt that reads like the joke your uncle would put on a novelty mug at the outlet mall in 2004. Let me tell you what that shirt looks like. That shirt looks like it was made at a state fair. That shirt looks like it was airbrushed next to a booth guessing your weight. That shirt looks like it was next to a booth selling deep-fried Oreos. That shirt looks like a birthday gift from a coworker who does not really know you. And Drake, the biggest pop star of a generation, walked around a room, in front of cameras, wearing a State Fair t-shirt, to communicate that he does not respect LeBron James, a man Drake literally tattooed onto his own body. Let that sit. Drake, at some point, walked into a tattoo parlor, sat in the chair, took off his shirt, and paid a licensed professional to permanently ink LeBron's face onto his skin. And now, years later, Drake is standing in a room with a spray-painted joke shirt, trying to tell the internet the only LeBron he rates is a padel player from Spain. That is not a diss. That is a confession. That is a man screaming from a rooftop that he cannot let go. Because if it did not matter, the tattoo would not exist. If it did not matter, the shirt would not exist. If it did not matter, the club moment would not exist. If it did not matter, the album line would not exist. Everything Drake has done in the last calendar year has been an argument against the position Drake is trying to sell. Drake keeps saying, "I do not care," in the loudest voice on planet Earth, wearing merchandise that took a graphic design team a week to finalize. And think about the operational chain of custody on that shirt for one more second, because it is genuinely staggering. Somebody had to design the mock-up. Somebody had to approve the mock-up. Somebody had to send the mock-up to production. Somebody had to receive the physical samples. Somebody had to give final sign-off. Somebody had to fold them, stack them, ship them, hang them, and light them for the room. That is not a spontaneous joke. That is not a spur-of-the-moment jab. That is a full corporate workflow, funded by a multi-platinum artist, coordinated across a team of paid professionals, executed with the seriousness of a real product launch. And the final output is a spray-painted padel joke pointed at a man Drake tattooed on his own body. If you presented that as a case study in a marketing class, the entire class would fail Drake for the semester. I want you to imagine, and I mean truly imagine, being LeBron James right now, sitting on a couch in Los Angeles, holding a glass of wine, scrolling your phone, and finding out that a rapper you tattooed on your own real estate is currently in another city wearing a hand-sprayed t-shirt about a padel player. There is not a version of that story where LeBron feels anything except pity. There is not a version of that story where LeBron loses sleep. There is not a version of that story where LeBron goes upstairs and tells Savannah, "Honey, I am shaken. Drake made a t-shirt about me." That does not happen. That never happens. That will never happen. And Drake knows it. Drake knows it. Drake absolutely knows it. Which is why Drake keeps digging. Now let me sit you down, because I want to talk about the deeper mechanic here. Every one of Drake's disses in the last 12 months has one common denominator. It is not skill. It is not craft. It is not bars. It is not rhythm. It is not flow. It is not narrative. It is not story. It is not any of the elements of the art form Drake claims to have mastered. It is one word: bitterness. Every single one is dripping in bitterness. And bitterness is not a strategy. Bitterness is not a flex. Bitterness is a leak in the roof. Bitterness will drown a career. And Drake, at the level Drake has climbed to, cannot afford a leaking roof. Because let us be real about the LeBron situation, because I think a lot of people are dancing around this. The core of this diss is not that Drake dislikes LeBron. The core is that LeBron went to a Kendrick Lamar show. LeBron rapped along to Not Like Us. LeBron enjoyed himself. LeBron did what a fan does. And Drake could not handle it. Drake could not swallow it. Drake could not process a fully grown adult male making a full-grown adult decision to enjoy a piece of music. So Drake did what a jilted lover does. Drake blocked LeBron in his heart. Drake unfollowed LeBron in his soul. And now Drake is dressing his room in t-shirts about it. That is not a rap move. That is a breakup move. That is the move of somebody who found out their ex went to a party and now suddenly the ex is the worst person in the world. That is the energy of the scorned girlfriend who suddenly hates the man she loved a week ago because he laughed at somebody else's joke. Drake, and I am saying this with my whole chest, Drake, you are giving scorned bridesmaid at a wedding you were not invited to. That is the energy. That is the aesthetic. That is the drip. And Drake is walking around like nobody sees it. And I want to zoom out on the LeBron shirt, because there is a layer to it that almost nobody has caught. That line, "The only LeBron I rate is Juan," is a warped version of a legendary Jay-Z lyric. Jay-Z famously said, "The only Christopher we acknowledge is Wallace. I do not even like Washingtons in the 50, get it?" That bar is not just a punchline. That bar is a militant, culturally aware, historically loaded statement about Christopher Columbus, about colonialism, about who gets acknowledged and who does not, about a black man rewriting the language of legacy in real time. That is a bar with a spine. That is a bar with a purpose. That is a bar with 100 years of pain baked into every syllable. Now watch what Drake did. Drake took that framework, that culturally coded, revolutionary structure, and used it to shout out a padel player from Spain to jab at LeBron James. Drake, my brother in Christ, that is not homage. That is not remix. That is not respectful borrowing. That is what happens when a Canadian pop star runs out of ideas and reaches into the culture bag to grab something that sounds smart. And the moment you decode what Drake actually took, the whole shirt collapses in on itself. Drake did not translate that Jay-Z bar. Drake defanged it. Drake sanded down every edge. Drake put a beach towel over a sword. It is one of the corniest cultural appropriations I have ever seen a rapper of Drake's caliber attempt in a public setting, and the wildest part is that nobody in Drake's room, in Drake's team, in Drake's inner circle, in Drake's warehouse of yes men, had the courage to walk up to him and say, "This is going to embarrass you." Because that is Drake's problem. That has always been Drake's problem. Drake does not have friends. Drake has employees. Drake has an entourage. Drake has an ecosystem. And every single person in that ecosystem is on a payroll that requires them to nod. When Drake decided the shirt was fire, nobody said, "Drake, this reads like a bumper sticker." When Drake decided to point at his own, I say that with my whole heart. If A$AP Rocky drops a diss, if LeBron drops a bar, if Kendrick drops a whole album about it, that is the game, that is the sport, that is the culture. But this is not battle rap. This is not sport. This is a man who cannot get over a woman using millions of dollars, a global platform, and a team of stylists to project the smallest possible energy on the biggest possible screen. And every single time Drake does it, Drake is not chipping away at A$AP Rocky's legacy, or LeBron's legacy, or Kendrick's legacy. Drake is chipping away at Drake's legacy. Drake is the only person Drake is dissing. Drake is his own op. Drake is his own smoke. Drake is his own diss track. Let me put the microscope on the chain again for one more second, because I did not fully finish that thought and it deserves the full weight. Drake, at some point, told the world that every diamond on that chain represents a woman he almost married. Every stone is a wound. Every glimmer is a scar. Every glint is a rejection. So when Drake steps in front of a camera wearing that chain and points at another man's scar, Drake is not roasting A$AP Rocky. Drake is showcasing his own map of loss. Drake is saying, "Look at me, I have collected the marks of everyone who did not want me, and now I am going to point at the mark of a man who was actually chosen." That is not a flex. That is a museum tour of Drake's dating history, and every exhibit is titled "She Said No." And Rihanna. My God. Rihanna. There is a reason her name keeps orbiting this story like a moon. Rihanna is not just a woman. Rihanna is a cultural gravity well. Rihanna is a black hole of charisma. Rihanna is the kind of star that if you plot her on a graph next to Cleopatra, next to Helen of Troy, next to the empresses and queens that make history books, Rihanna does not just fit, Rihanna raises the bar. Civilizations have fallen for smaller women than Rihanna. Rome has been sacked for less than one Fenny campaign. If Rihanna had a time machine and rolled back 3,000 years, she would not just be Cleopatra, she would be the reason we invented 3 new languages just to describe her. And Drake, and this is the punchline, Drake tried to kiss this woman on stage in front of the entire world one time, and it did not land. It did not land. It did not land. And Drake has been trying to unland that non-landing ever since. Rihanna made her choice. Rihanna chose A$AP Rocky. Rihanna kept choosing A$AP Rocky. Rihanna is currently building a whole civilization with A$AP Rocky. And every time Drake opens his mouth about that scar, about that chain, about that face, about that mirror, Drake is confirming that Rihanna's choice was correct. Because there is not a version of a woman on planet Earth who watches. Drake always waits for the room to empty. Drake always waits for the plane to take off. Drake always waits for the target to be far enough away that Drake can raise his voice without consequence. And then, from the safe zone, from the studio, from the club, from the private jet, from the hotel, Drake lets it fly. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. That is a lifestyle. That is a personality type. And in every single generation of hip-hop, there has been one word for that type. And you know the word. I do not need to say it. You already thought it before I finished this paragraph. And listen, I am not even mad at Drake for being that. I am mad at Drake for pretending he is the opposite. I am mad at Drake for building an entire album called Iceman on the premise that he is untouchable. I am mad at Drake for looking into the camera on stage and pretending he does not care while wearing a chain of diamonds, each representing a woman who did not pick him. That is the crime. Not the pettiness. Not the shirts. Not the scar joke. Not the LeBron tattoo. The crime is the gap between the pose and the pattern. The pose says, I am cold as ice. The pattern says, I am boiling every night. Because think about the timeline. Drake mocks A$AP Rocky, a man who owns a piece of Drake's soul, because A$AP Rocky is with the woman Drake wanted. Drake disses LeBron, a man who owns a piece of Drake's skin because Drake tattooed LeBron onto his body. Drake takes shots at Kendrick, a man who owns a piece of Drake's calendar because 2 years later Drake still cannot stop talking about him. Every single person Drake claims to hate is someone Drake gave real estate to. His body, his music, his public image, his schedule, his interviews, his album title, his chain, his stage, his shirts, his set list. Everything Drake owns is a monument to somebody Drake claims to be over. That is not victory. That is a museum. Drake is walking around inside a museum he built for his own losses and calling it a tour. Drake is charging admission for a gallery of his own defeats. Drake is standing at the door with a red velvet rope, like a bouncer at his own emotional funeral. And every night, the doors open and Drake gives another tour, and the exhibits are the same, the placards are the same, the crowd is the same, and the only thing that changes is which mark Drake decides to point at that particular evening. Look at how the internet responded, because the comments in the last 24 hours have been merciless in the most poetic way. One of the top responses simply said, "Cole is losing sleep on this, it ain't me." That is a Pinocchio moment. That is Drake staring in a mirror lying to himself. Because Drake has absolutely, provably, publicly, embarrassingly lost countless nights of sleep over this. Nobody hires a whole design team to spray a Juan Lebrón shirt if they are sleeping soundly. Nobody choreographs a scar-mocking finger drag if they are at peace. Nobody drops an album named Iceman if the inside of their body is not radiating heat. The emotional temperature of Drake's entire discography over the last 2 years has been triple-digit fever. And Drake keeps telling us he is cool. Drake, my man, your forehead is glowing. Another comment I saw floating around said something along the lines of, Drake's Google search history right now is who else is named LeBron. And you know what? That is not just funny, that is forensic. That is the truth. That is the actual truth. Because a person who is over something does not spend an afternoon Googling alternative LeBrons. A person who is over something goes on with their day. A person who is over something does not commission a graphic tee. A person who is over something does not stack a diss into an album, drag it into a shirt, and pantomime it in a club within the same 24-hour cycle. That is not being over. That is being consumed. And here is where I want to close the loop on A$AP Rocky, because I do not want anybody to miss what actually happened tonight. Drake did not diss A$AP Rocky. Drake confirmed him. Every finger drag across the face, every whisper of the Burning Bridges lyric, every side eye at the camera, is proof that A$AP Rocky lives rent-free in the biggest building Drake owns, which is Drake's own head. A$AP Rocky did not have to say anything. Because when your opponent is doing the work of dissing themselves in real time, the greatest move you can make is to sit still and let the cameras document it. And that is exactly what A$AP Rocky did. Silence, in this specific case, is the loudest bar of the year. And I want to give A$AP Rocky his flowers here, because it has to be said. A$AP Rocky is winning without lifting a finger. A$AP Rocky is winning by simply existing. A$AP Rocky is winning by continuing to make music. A$AP Rocky is winning by continuing to be a father. A$AP Rocky is winning by continuing to be a partner. A$AP Rocky is winning by walking into rooms without needing to explain who he is. And every time Drake points at his face, Drake is not diminishing A$AP Rocky. Drake is dropping another star on A$AP Rocky's Walk of Fame. Drake is unpaid PR for a man Drake claims to hate. Drake is a walking billboard for the guy who beat him at love, at legacy, and at posture. Now for the people in the back who still want to argue, let me give you the receipts one more time in one long clean line. Drake had the moment at the World Cup event and stayed silent. Drake got on a stage far away from that same crew and finally spoke. Drake wore a chain of women who did not marry him while pointing at the scar of the man one of those women did choose. Drake commissioned a corny Juan Lebrón shirt to insult a man he permanently tattooed on his own arm. Drake built an entire album cycle around men he says he does not care about. Drake keeps telling us he has moved on while every single artistic and business decision he makes is a monument to the people he claims are irrelevant. Add all of that up. That is not a winner. That is a very talented, very rich, very insecure person walking through a maze of his own construction, and the walls are closing in. And here is what worries me for Drake, and I do mean worries me, because at some point this stops being funny and starts being sad. Drake is teaching an entire generation of young men that this is how you handle rejection. That you write about her. That you tattoo the people she prefers. That you subtweet the people she chose. That you commission t-shirts and album titles about it. That you stand in front of cameras and point at the marks of the men she picks. That is the lesson Drake is broadcasting nightly. And there are boys, actual boys, watching this and internalizing it. And that is a legacy Drake cannot delete after the fact. You want to know what a real king move looks like? A real king move looks like A$AP Rocky posting nothing. A real king move looks like Rihanna wearing whatever she wants without addressing a word of it. A real king move looks like LeBron laughing on a couch and going back to his family. A real king move looks like Kendrick not needing to acknowledge the noise because the music is already deafening. A real king move looks like showing up and shutting up. And Drake is doing the opposite. Drake is not showing up and Drake is not shutting up. Drake is hiding out and Drake is speaking constantly. That is not a king. That is a court jester with a nicer chain. And let us not pretend that the community around Drake is helping him either, because it is not. It is enabling him. It is applauding this. It is running the clips back. It is chopping the moment into short form. It is spinning the Juan Lebrón shirt into a rallying cry. And in the process, they are convincing Drake that this is winning. They are telling Drake that pointing at a scar is bold. They are telling Drake that a State Fair t-shirt is fashion. They are telling Drake that repackaging a Jay-Z bar for a padel joke is genius. And Drake, surrounded by that echo, keeps building bigger monuments to smaller ideas. That is why Drake keeps losing rounds he thinks he is winning. Because in Drake's ear, everything sounds like applause. In Drake's ear, everything sounds like a standing ovation. In Drake's ear, everything sounds like history. But in the actual world, in the real world, on the actual internet, in actual barbershops, in actual group chats, in actual family cookouts, in actual sports bars, in actual green rooms across the industry, the temperature reading on Drake's antics is somewhere between mild embarrassment and full-spectrum secondhand shame. Everybody sees it. Except Drake. Except Drake. Except Drake. Now let me remind you where we started, because we have traveled a lot of ground. Drake, at the Nocta event, pointed at his own face during the line, "Look in the mirror, see where talking gets you," in a track called Burning Bridges, to mock A$AP Rocky's scar. Then, at the same event, Drake unveiled a t-shirt line reading "The only LeBron I rate is Juan," mocking LeBron James, a man Drake once literally inked onto his skin. All of this while wearing a chain of diamonds designed to represent women who did not marry him, including the exact woman whose partner Drake is mocking. If you write that on paper, if you put it on a whiteboard, If you diagram it in a courtroom, it is a case study in self-sabotage. And the only person who does not see it is Drake. I want you to think about what a therapist would say if a client walked in and described this behavior. This client points at another man's scar while wearing symbols of his own rejection. This client tattoos men he later publicly disses. This client writes entire albums about people he claims not to care about. This client spends his evenings choreographing insults toward a woman's partner he cannot get over. A therapist would not call that a rap beef. A therapist would call that a diagnosis. And I am telling you right now, if Drake had a real friend in that camp, one real friend, not an employee, one real friend, that friend would sit Drake down and say, "Brother, we need to log off." But Drake will not log off. Drake will double down. Drake will triple down. Drake will build another album about this. Drake will wear another shirt about this. Drake will point at another scar about this. Because Drake has confused motion with progress. Drake has confused volume with victory. Drake has confused a viral moment with a lasting one. And history, real history, hip-hop history, the kind of history that is written 20 years from now, will not remember the scar drag as a win. History will remember the scar drag as the exact frame where Drake, one of the most talented artists of his generation, revealed the smallest possible version of himself in the highest possible resolution. And A$AP Rocky, silently, from his living room, with Rihanna in the next room, will not have to say a single word about it. That is checkmate. That is game over. That is the scoreboard. That is the receipt. That is the verdict. There is no version of tomorrow where this ages well for Drake. There is no version of next week where this looks bold in hindsight. There is no version of next month where this is anything other than the punchline of a very expensive tantrum. And here is my final piece for the road. Because I know Drake's team is watching. I know the OVO room is watching. I know the Iceman defenders are typing. Listen. I am not telling you to abandon Drake. I am not telling you to stop streaming Drake. I am not telling you to unfollow Drake. I am telling you to stop lying to Drake. Stop clapping for the shirt. Stop clapping for the finger drag. Stop clapping for the Kendrick lines. Stop clapping for the LeBron subtweets. Because every clap you give in that room is a nail in a career that could still be one of the greatest of all time if the man could just, for once, sit still, log off, and let a woman he cannot have live her life in peace with a man she actually chose. That is the whole story. That is the whole beef. That is the whole scoreboard. Drake tried to violate A$AP Rocky over a scar. Drake tried to diss LeBron over a shirt. Drake wore a chain of losses to mock a man who won. And A$AP Rocky, LeBron, Rihanna, and Kendrick did what winners do. They kept living. They kept breathing. They kept building. They kept eating. They kept smiling. They kept winning. And the only person who left this week smaller than he entered it, and I mean physically, spiritually, culturally, artistically, and reputationally, is Drake. So tell me in the comments, and I want a real answer, not a fan war, a real answer. Do you think Drake actually believes he is winning right now? Or do you think Drake knows, deep down, in the quietest part of the night when the chain is off and the cameras are gone, that he lost this one the moment Rihanna said yes to somebody else? Drop your take below. Do not hold back. I read them all. And if you laughed, if you nodded, if you leaned in, if you felt any of this, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new around here, and share this with the one friend in your group chat who still tries to argue that Drake won the last 2 years, because after tonight, brother, there is no argument left to make. Before you click off, do yourself a favor and watch the next video I have queued up, because if you thought the scar drag was wild, wait until you see the receipts on what LeBron's inner circle is quietly saying about the whole Nocta night, and how Kendrick's team is reportedly reacting behind the scenes to Drake using burning bridges as a weapon. It is a bigger story than anybody is telling you, and it starts exactly where this one ends. Click it, keep watching, and let us stay locked in together, because hip-hop is moving fast right now, and you do not want to miss a single frame. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, stay tuned. This one is only getting started.